Commandant Velthara's four eyes twitched nervously as she reviewed the admission roster for the 2387 academic cycle. The holographic display showed 847 accepted cadets from across the galaxy's most prestigious species, Altarian nobles with their crystalline intellects, Kepler-born Zephyrians whose six-dimensional thinking had revolutionized quantum mechanics, and the methodical Centaurian collective minds that could process 1,000,000 calculations simultaneously. And then, at the bottom of the list, two names that made her mandibles click with anxiety: Sarah Chen and Marcus Rodriguez. Both human, both accepted into the Galactic Military Academy's elite officer program. She had tried to reject one of them. The Academy's unwritten rule, established after the infamous incident of 2381, was clear: never accept more than one human per cycle. But the Terran embassy had applied pressure, citing discrimination laws, and the Academy's board had overruled her. Now she would pay the price. The first sign of trouble came during orientation week. Chen and Rodriguez hadn't even met yet when they independently identified 17 critical flaws in the Academy's defensive systems. Not the obvious ones that other species might notice. Those had been intentionally placed as training exercises. No, these humans had somehow spotted actual vulnerabilities in a system designed by the galaxy's finest military engineers. When Velthara's assistant, a nervous Altarian named Crystalline Thought Flows Like Rivers, brought her the reports, she felt her exoskeleton shiver. "Perhaps it's a coincidence, Commandant," the assistant suggested hopefully. Velthara's laugh was bitter. "There are no coincidences with humans, only controlled chaos that they mistake for strategy." The second incident occurred during the Yao mandatory combat simulation. Each species had evolved different approaches to warfare. The Zephyrians used mathematical precision, the Centaurians overwhelmed enemies through coordinated swarm tactics, and the Altarians relied on their ability to predict outcomes with crystalline clarity. But humans were unpredictable. Chen, a slight figure barely reaching the thorax of her Centaurian roommate, had been placed in Alpha Squadron. Rodriguez, stockier and perpetually grinning, commanded Beta Squadron. The exercise was simple: capture the enemy flag while defending your own. The Academy's quantum supercomputers had run millions of simulations. Victory should have gone to either the Altarian-led Gamma Squadron with their superior tactics, or the Zephyrian-dominated Delta Squadron with their advanced spatial reasoning. Instead, within 30 minutes of the simulation beginning, both human squadrons had somehow formed an unofficial alliance. Not through communication. The exercise forbade direct contact between squads. Not through predetermined strategy. They had never spoken before the exercise began. They had simply understood each other. Chen's squad created a diversion in the eastern sector, drawing 3 enemy squadrons into a complex tactical engagement that should have lasted hours. Meanwhile, Rodriguez's team had done something that broke every conventional rule of the simulation. They split up. Half his squad began constructing what appeared to be defensive fortifications in completely useless locations. The other half disappeared entirely, somehow masking their biosignatures in a way that impressed even the Academy's stealth instructors. When the dust settled, Chen's squad had not only survived their 3-to-1 engagement, but had captured 2 enemy flags in the chaos. Rodriguez's missing squad members had meanwhile infiltrated every remaining enemy base, not to capture flags, but to reprogram the simulation parameters themselves. The exercise ended when Rodriguez's team activated a hidden subroutine they had somehow coded during the battle, causing all remaining enemy flags to display the message: "Humans send their regards." The Academy's instructors spent 3 days analyzing what had happened. The consensus was disturbing. The 2 humans had somehow coordinated a complex joint operation without any formal communication, using what they called tactical empathy and creative problem-solving. Terms that, when translated into most alien languages, came out as dangerous unpredictability and reality-warping chaos. But the final straw came during the diplomatic relations course. Professor Ninth Echo of Distant Suns, a renowned Altarian, diplomat who had negotiated peace treaties across 17 sectors, had assigned a seemingly impossible task: mediate a trade dispute between 4 historically incompatible species. The scenario involved the warlike Kron Empire, the pacifist Lumina Collective, the profit-obsessed Ferengi-adjacent Bargain Consortium, and the honor-bound Stellar Samurai of Kepler 7. For 2 centuries, no Academy cadet had successfully resolved this scenario. It was designed to teach students that some conflicts were truly insurmountable, and that recognizing futility was itself a valuable diplomatic skill. Chen and Rodriguez requested to work as partners. Velthara's immediate instinct was to refuse, but academic regulations required justification for such denials. She couldn't admit that her real fear was what might happen if 2 humans collaborated on a problem that was supposed to be unsolvable. The presentation took place in the Academy's grand amphitheater, with faculty and students from every species in attendance. Chen began by acknowledging the historical impossibility of the task, then introduced what they called the human solution. Instead of trying to resolve the trade dispute, they had convinced all 4 species to join together in a completely different venture: a joint military expedition against a 5th party that didn't exist in the original scenario: humanity itself. Every species involved, Rodriguez explained with that characteristic human grin, shares one common trait. They've all lost battles to humans at some point in their history. We gave them a chance to win one by working together. The fictional trade dispute became irrelevant when faced with the bonding experience of planning humanity's hypothetical defeat. The 4 species formed lasting alliances, established new trade networks, and even began cultural exchange programs. Professor Ninth Echo of Distant Suns awarded them the highest marks in the course's history, then immediately submitted a request for early retirement. That evening, Velthara called an emergency meeting with the Academy's board of directors. The holographic conference room filled with concerned faces, tentacles, and crystalline formations from across the galaxy. The humans, she began without preamble, have solved the unsolvable, befriended the unbefriendable, and somehow convinced 4 historically hostile species to bond over their shared desire to defeat humanity. And they did this as a class assignment. The Zephyrian board member, existing in 6 dimensions simultaneously, managed to look troubled in all of them. What do you recommend, Commandant? We return to the old policy immediately. 1 human per cycle, maximum, and we make sure they never, ever meet the humans from previous cycles. The Altarian representative's crystalline form pulsed with anxiety. What happens when they graduate and join the galactic fleet? Velthara's mandibles clicked ominously. Then the universe becomes a much more interesting place, and the rest of us learn to adapt to whatever impossible solutions they come up with next. As the meeting adjourned, she looked once more at the roster displaying Chen and Rodriguez's names. 2 humans, barely adults by their species standards, had somehow turned her prestigious academy into their personal playground of creative chaos. She made a mental note to update the academy's insurance policies and began drafting new regulations. In the event of human collaboration, all faculty are advised to maintain safe distances, document everything, and prepare for outcomes that violate at least 3 laws of physics. The rule limiting human admissions wasn't about discrimination, she realized. It was about survival. For the academy, for conventional military doctrine, and for the sanity of educators across the galaxy. Because when humans worked together, the impossible became inevitable, and the inevitable became beautifully, terrifyingly unpredictable.